Good morning, YouTube, and today I'll be coming at you with a budget Dinomist deck profile. There's plenty of more competitive builds online, but I found that this one's quite efficient, and it costs about $5 for the entire main deck, and that's pretty darn cool. What's fantastic about Dinomist is that they're their own self-contained archetype, which means you can use just about everything from the archetype itself and still make a viable deck. So starting off, we have our one super rare. It's funny, this is the one high rarity card in the deck, and it's Dinomist Rex. Each one of the scales have different effects, which I'll go on to as we progress. Rex has two effects. You can tribute a Dinomist monster, and he can make a second attack on an opponent's monster, or he can be like a Dark Law and steal something off of your opponent's monster. It's pretty cool. Next, we have two of Spinos. Spinos wasn't really introduced until later on. He's your scale 3 of the big two, in my opinion. You can tribute another Dinomist monster, and he gets one of the following effects. He can either attack directly or attack twice, but that's not limited to once per turn. So what you can do is you can tribute out two Dinomist monsters, and he can attack your opponent twice directly. And that's like a minimum, if he has his original attack, that's a minimum of 5,000 damage. That itself is pretty darn awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and read you each of the scales. All the scale 6s have the effect, once while this card's in your pendulum zone, you can negate the activation of an effect that targets a Dinomist card you control, then destroy this card. And then all the 3s have, if another Dinomist monster you control will be destroyed by battle or an opponent's card effect, you can destroy this card effect. So really they can protect themselves from just about everything. It's pretty darn cool. Moving on, we run 2 Brachion and 2 Ceratops. These 8 right here are all your 5-star monsters. It's pretty darn cool. Each one of these acts like a Cyber Dragon. Ceratops is just if you have another Dinomist monster, and Dinomist Brachion is more of like a Cyber Dragon, depending on your opponent's attack points. Pretty darn cool. Next, moving on to our 4s. We're going to place of each one of them. Pteranodon is really the most expensive Dinomist card, I think. And like if you go from highest to lowest, this is the most expensive one because it's a rare. It's really weird. When it destroys your opponent's monster by battle, you can search your deck for a Dinomist card and add it from your hand, or add it to your hand. So that's pretty cool, and it gives you some search power. Plus, there's an 1800 beat stick, which isn't that bad. They're all not too bad in terms of stat-wise. Next, we're on triple of Stegosaur. If another pendulum monster you control would be destroyed by your opponent's monster, you can destroy both monsters at the end of battle. So, like, your opponent attacks into Pteranodon, they attack over both of them, or you attack into him, you protect him with one of your scales, and you destroy both monsters instead. It's pretty darn cool. It's non-targeting. Next, we run triple of Ankylos. Banish any monster destroyed by battle with a Dinomist monster. It's pretty cool, so your opponent can get the pluses off the graveyard, as a lot of decks like to have. Rounding up our monsters, it's a pretty decently sized monster build, but there's not too much you need. Next we run Dinomist Plesiosaurus. All face-up monsters your opponent controls lose attack and a defense equal for each face-up Dinomist card you control. That includes your scales and like a trap card if it's being activated. So that's pretty darn awesome in itself, and it's stackable, which is great. That's just 100 attack, but it's still, after a while, it stacks up pretty darn nicely. Next, you have your awesome Tenki of the deck, which is Dinomist Charge. You're going to add a Dinomist monster from your deck to your hand, obviously, but second effect is once per turn, if a Dinomist card is added from your extra deck, or your field to the extra deck, add one of those cards to your hand. That's obviously once per turn, but it gives you nice little synergy, especially now that Link Summoning prevents you from exploding from your extra deck. This gives you a little bit more synergy and adds it to your hand in case you need to establish your scales, because you'll be using them to sacrifice a lot. Next, we're on triple of Dinomist Overload. All Dinomist monsters gain 300 attack and defense. If a Dinomist monster you control battles, your opponent cannot activate spell or cards at the end of the damage step. So it's remedies for all your Dinomist monsters, each and every one of them. Yes, it may not be the best field spell out of them, but it makes your battle phase far more safer, in my opinion. Next, we run a limit removal. This is an ultra rare. Obviously, you can find this for far cheaper. This card has been reprinted over and over again. We run triple Mystical Space Typhoon. Super easy to find. You can go to most people and they'll have some just laying around. Pretty darn cool. Next, moving on to our traps, we have triple of Dinomist Eruption. If a Dinomist monster you control is destroyed by battle or card effect, target a monster your opponent controls and destroy it. That is pretty cool. Or, excuse me, one card your opponent controls and destroy it. That can be anything that you possibly want to. That is pretty darn cool. Next, we run triple of the Dinomist Rush. Special summon a Dinomist monster from your deck, and if you do, is unaffected by other cards and destroyed during the end phase. That is pretty cool, and like you can just use it as an Exceed potential or a Link potential during the end phase. There's so many possibilities that you can do, and gives you so much more plus. Next, run a newer card, triple of Dinomist Howling. This allows you to set up your scales, but you can't potential summon until the end of the next turn, except for Dinomist monsters, which that's, self-explanatory. As per turn, if this card is on your face-up, it's already face-up on the spell and trap card zone, you can tribute a Dinomist monster, target one card your opponent controls, and return it to their hand. Pretty darn cool. And rounding up our traps, we have just some more staple stuff. Double Mirror Force, obviously you can find that anywhere you want to. One Compulse, it's a great card. I mean, obviously there's a reason it's still at 1, so it's not too bad to throw into these kind of budget decks. Obviously, that's a $5 budget build of this deck. That is fantastic. Moving on to our extra deck. Obviously, this is something that's going to cost you a little bit extra if you want to invest in it, but it's something that's nice to have, and I like to include extra decks in all my profiles as much as I can to try and max them out. Mistar Boy at 2 because he works great with the deck. If you want to search like a locals or a regional or something, the opponent opens a lot of Circuit Break. These are definitely commons that people will likely already have and just toss it aside like, hey, can I have those Mistar Boys? And they're like, yeah, sure. So it's pretty darn good common you can search for. Cyber Dragon Infinity and Cyber Dragon Nova. This obviously is a little bit more expensive, but it was recently reprinted in the new Dragons structure deck, so you can obtain these a lot easier. This is one of your go-to things because you run 8 5-star monsters, so it's really easy to go into Infinity and just sit on it. It gives you more reaction to this kind of a deck. As for the rest of the ring, I have a Shark Fortress. This is a common. It's pretty darn cheap too. It allows you to attack twice, and your opponent's monsters can only target Shark Fortress for attack, so it allows you to keep your names of Dinomists on the field. So that's pretty darn cool. 101, I play 2 of them because 101's always been one of my favorites. You can search, you can find some pretty cheap ones out there. A Snowdust Giant. Obviously, we're just going with gimmicks here. We're trying to find cheaper rank 4 monsters. This requires 2 water-type monsters. You can detach 1 Exceed materials from this card, reveal any number of water monsters in your hand, which all these Dinomists are, and they all lose 200 attack for each ice counter field. So he gains the ice counters equal to the number of water monsters in your hand, and you put them onto him. It's really gimmicky, but it's kind of fun and not too bad. Terrible of a card, especially for a budget build. It's not too expensive of a card. A heavy armored trained Iron Wolf. This allows you to attack directly with him, and when you sent to the graveyard, you can add a machine type monster from your deck to your hand. That's not too terrible. This was also printed recently in Raging Tempest, and it's a super that's not too expensive and difficult to obtain. 1 Geargiant X. This is a common. I mean, it's reprinted in Structured X and a few other things, and you just detach Exceed material, add to your hand. Obviously, Castell is his Duelist Saga. It was reprinted in, so it's not too difficult to obtain. Heartland Draco. I mean, Tornado Dragon. This can be replaced with anything. And that's going to wrap up my Dinomist, my budget Dinomist. It's definitely a more fun deck that your opponent doesn't really know how to play around. Even I had to reread some of the cards, and I played with it for a little while because it takes a while to get used to, and it's a sleeper deck. There's a YCS recently where it actually made pretty high up. It was pretty darn good. Obviously, it was a more heavy build in terms of other more expensive cards, but this is something that I kind of threw together because I was looking through a bunch of commons, and I was like, well, Dinomist cards, let's throw them together. And I made this deck, and it's fun, and it actually wins a decent amount of the time. So it's definitely a different budget build that you can do if you're really trying to get into the game. Obviously, budget is whatever you make it, but this is something that you can pick up pretty cheaply rather than like pick up 3 of a structure deck and make a deck. This is a different option. Like, you can even look around and try and find some of your friends that have a bunch of just cards just laying around, a lot of times you'll find these just really cheap cards and pick them up pretty darn easily. Anyway, hope you can pick up something out of this, and thank you very much, and have a great day.